This is 5 on 20 News, where the news might boggle your mind, but the newscaster will knock your socks off. With your Alex Kack, coming to you live from our studio in downtown Tucson. And first, the local headlines. As part of Donald Trump's immigration crackdown in the U.S., the president is reviving a program that deputizes local law enforcement. The decision was largely overlooked because it fell on the same day that Trump announced his plans for a big, beautiful, titillating, and titanic border wall. But the deputizing program may turn out to be even more damaging for the immigrant community. The initiative was originally established in 2009 under the Obama administration, where more than 60 police and sheriff's agencies received special authority to enforce immigration laws in addition to local policing. By 2013, the program was eliminated, and local officials were stripped of the power to make immigration-related arrests. This was due to a massive number of complaints alleging harassment and racial profiling among the immigrant community. One of the most egregious violations occurred under Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who assembled his posse to terrorize local immigrants like it was the great America of the 1950s. Trump signed the immigration order on Friday. It states that local law enforcement would act in investigation, apprehension, or detention of immigrants in the country illegally. But Tucson has stated that they will not take part in the program, joining cities like Phoenix, Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York who plan to defy the order. This could complicate the efforts because the program requires that local officers receive training from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. If cities decide to disobey the law, then Trump has threatened to cut federal funding as part of his crackdown on so-called sanctuary cities. It's also unclear, though, if cities are to receive additional federal funds to help implement the programs, which would put a heavy burden on local law enforcement. And some Medicaid recipients in Arizona might be in trouble because of a loophole in an overturned law. In 2015, Doug Ducey passed SB 1092, which would have cut off Medicare for able-bodied recipients after 5 years. The law would have also required those on Medicare to be actively searching for a job during the course of those 5 years. There were exceptions to this rule for certain mental and physical handicaps, but the law was criticized for being too vague and for leaving some types of diseases and disabilities out. In 2016, the federal government rejected the law because it would undermine access to care. However, it left in a condition where Arizona would have to resubmit each year by March 30th to the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. With a new administration at the helm, this might be a problem for some Arizona residents. Diseases that cause chronic pain, such as lupus and multiple sclerosis, would likely not be covered because of their nature. These diseases tend to come and go at random intervals, so it's difficult to hold on to long-term employment. This complicates the issue of whether someone is able-bodied or not, as stated in the law. Others who would be at risk are caregivers of handicapped children and the elderly. Currently, the state's Medicare program, the Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, or ACCESS, enrolls nearly a quarter of the state's population. If major cuts took place, this would result in more people using the emergency room for care, which is more expensive for the healthcare budget overall. And a federal magistrate is criticizing the Border Patrol for withholding information requested as part of a Freedom of Information request. The ACLU sought the information to assess the policing techniques of the Border Patrol in southern Arizona. While the government released some information regarding the issue, they refused to provide information about the ethnicity and skin complexion. Homeland Security claimed that they couldn't release the information because of privacy concerns. However, the ACLU says the names are not included in their request. These concerns are unfounded. Homeland Security also refused to provide exact locations of the 55 Border Patrol checkpoints in Arizona. They claim that these checkpoints need to be kept a surprise in order to be effective. The ACLU countered that the Supreme Court has ruled that checkpoints should be visible to lessen the fear and surprise from law-abiding motorists. The ruling was intended to ease the feeling of intrusiveness from the checkpoint, but based on the information the ACLU did acquire, it's pretty bad. Their 55-page report details numerous allegations of racial profiling, threatening behavior, destruction of property, and criminal use of wraparound sunglasses. The report also found that Border Patrol interfered with community members trying to record video of their activities. The checkpoints turned out not only to be a festival of racially intolerant behavior, but also ineffective. Border Patrol drug dogs were found to have been responsible for dozens of false alerts, leading Governor Ducey to call them bad boys and placing a cone of shame on the dog's head. Of the 55 checkpoints, 2 in the Tucson area account for 75% of the state's apprehensions. At the 53 other checkpoints, not much is happening besides poker game and a staged production of Jesus and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. On Tuesday, activists are set to protest in downtown Tucson to gain support for opposing Donald Trump's recent Muslim travel ban. The protest will meet from 4 to 7 p.m. in front of Senator McCain's office. Organizers are urging supporters to show up with signs to make themselves more visible. More than 150 people are already signed up to attend on Facebook, with double that number interested in the event. While McCain and fellow Senator Jeff Flake have come out against Trump's executive order, they have yet to take any action. Protesters are aiming to urge the senators to further condemn Trump's ban and use their congressional powers to fight back on the ruling. We'll see you there at 4 p.m. And 51 Tucson bars, restaurants, and markets were hit with fines last year. Altogether, these establishments' inability to hold their liquor has cost $45,000. Maloney's Tavern, a 4th Avenue bar with an atmosphere that's equal parts Patty's Pub and pre-Dalton era Double Deuce, has the dubious honor of receiving the largest fine. The tavern shelled out $8 grand last July for failing to protect patrons from serious acts of violence and having an employee drunk on duty. O'Malley's Bar and Grill, Hi-Fi Kitchen and Cocktails, and Ten's Nightclub were also hit with fines stemming from violent incidents. Most of the other fines resulted from over-serving or selling alcohol to minors. No matter what side of the bar you're on this year, remember to drink responsibly and to be nice until it's time to not be nice. One local group is taking the fight against hunger to the streets. Tucson Free Pantry has installed a public pantry at the historic Y located at 738 North 5th Avenue. The pantry is similar in appearance and application to the recent trend of little free libraries. Those in need of food are free to take it, and those who have extra food are free to leave it behind. Caparel Margavo Klein, the 24-year-old director of Tucson Free Pantry, says, quote, "My hope is that it can be kind of a self-sustaining organism. I like the idea that it can be there for anyone and everyone and just kind of bring the community together and help those who need it." Mavero Klein has plans to expand the program to other areas of town, with several free pantries currently under construction. For more information, visit TucsonFreePantry.com. And now, in national and international news. Trump's latest executive order bars citizens of Iraq, Syria, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen from entering the U.S. for the next 90 days. Despite multiple cheap heat mentions of the 9/11 terror attacks throughout the document, the home countries of the hijackers, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, were not included in the ban. The fact that these happen to be countries where Trump has done business is purely coincidental, of course. Contrary opinions will retroactively be punished with castration by a future insane executive order. The order also slashes the refugee cap from 110,000 to 50,000 this year, and will halt all refugee admittance for the next 4 months. The Trump team will use this time to overhaul the refugee vetting process, a process that already includes screening by the National Counterterrorism Center, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the State Department. The Trump vetting process is expected to include an ocular pat-down from Alex Jones and a religious test that would prioritize Christian refugees. The executive order went into effect on Friday in lieu of a signature, and Trump signed the document with a sketch depicting a gathering of hooded Klansmen. The global reaction to Trump's Muslim ban has been largely and unsurprisingly negative. Both Iraq and Sudan expressed astonishment at being blacklisted, even after being bombed for decades by the U.S. Iraq is still an ally in the fight against ISIS, and according to the Sudanese Foreign Affairs Ministry, quote, "The Sudanese citizens living in the United States are known for their good reputation. respect for American laws, and their lack of involvement in radical or criminal acts. Something that can be said for all the countries on the ban list. Of the terrorist attacks carried out on U.S. soil in recent memory, none of the perpetrators have been from the 7 countries named in the executive order. Iran has already taken reciprocal measures by banning U.S. citizens from traveling there. Yemen responded to the ban by being hit by a U.S. military raid early yesterday. The attack allegedly killed 14 al-Qaeda members and at least 10 women and children. Those seeking to escape constant U.S. bombings and the resulting terror can still seek refuge in Canada and Turkey, as both countries have taken to social media to announce they would accept those rejected by the U.S. And while he had us busy popping blood vessels over his Muslim immigration ban, Donald Trump quietly appointed a lobbyist for a company that supplied coal-fired power plants to a key environmental oversight position. Trump appointed Jeffrey H. Wood as the acting Assistant Attorney General in charge of the Department of Justice, the division dealing with environmental crimes. This includes enforcing laws related to pollutants released in the air, water, and land, and bringing legal charges against companies that violate these laws. Many of the companies targeted by the agency have been coal firms such as Duke Energy, who in 2015 was sued for spilling coal ash into North Carolina's Dan River. So it might be a problem that Wood comes off 2 years working for the Southern Company, who generates about a third of its power from coal. The Southern Company was already a target of a Security and Exchange Commission's investigation over irregular accounting measures. They also provide funding for the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, who lobbies lawmakers and provides pre-written legislation to undermine environmental laws. In his past, Wood also was a lobbyist for Balkan Bingham, where he worked to influence climate change and Clean Air Act laws for the Southern Company. He deregistered himself as a lobbyist only 3 days before taking over the position at the Justice Department. This continues a pattern of Trump appointing representatives of the fossil fuel and banking industries to top-level posts, where they will be expected to police the very same industries. The surprises continued on Monday when Trump named Jed Clampett as acting director of the EPA. Trump was later informed that Clampett is not, in fact, a real person, and the actor playing died decades ago, leading the president to uncomfortably sob for several minutes. And after hacks of the DNC and John Podesta's emails made Hillary Clinton seem less appealing than the sentient jack-o'-lantern we elected, one would think cybersecurity would be a priority. Apparently, Trump couldn't be bothered. According to a tweet from Your Anon News, Trump refuses to use any smartphone other than the Samsung Galaxy S3. To provide context for iPhone users, the Galaxy S8 is expected to be released sometime in the next few months. Trump's phone, which was originally released in 2012, can only be updated to Android 4.4. Android no longer supports the 4.4 operating system, leaving it vulnerable to a barrage of cyber attacks. Simply sending a multimedia message containing a video that includes a malware code is enough to gain access to the device. We here at 5 on 20 do not condone any illegal activity. Trump will likely continue to stay one step ahead of any would-be hackers by doing his most repulsive acts in clear view of news cameras. And ubiquitous coffee chain Starbucks plans to hire 10,000 refugees over 5 years in the 75 countries where it does business. CEO Howard Schultz announced the plan in a memo that appeared to be to Trump's recent Muslim travel ban. Schultz wrote that, quote, "We are living in an unprecedented time," and says that the company will prioritize interpreters who supported U.S. troops abroad. In the memo, Schultz also talked about his support for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. He said the company is ready to help and support Mexican citizens in the case of the proposed trade sanctions and immigration restrictions. Jeffrey Immelt, CEO of GE, also said that he opposed the law, along with the heads of several tech executives such as Google and Apple. Pornhub has yet to release a statement on the issue, but is planning to meet with Trump in the middle of the night on Wednesday. And sure, the Muslim ban might have been Trump's greatest hit, but don't ignore the B-sides. Another executive order signed by Trump on Saturday would reshuffle the National Security Council and refocus power within the agency. The order gave Chief Strategist Steve Bannon a regular seat at NSC meetings, an unusual move for a cabinet member with no military connections. Even stranger is that the Director of National Intelligence and the Joint Chiefs of Staff will be invited to meetings only when the subject pertains to them. Under previous administrations, the Joint Chiefs attended all meetings. The NSC is the main group who advises the President on national security matters and foreign affairs, so giving Bannon a seat at the table also gives him a chance to influence U.S. foreign policy. Bannon is a former editor-in-chief at Breitbart Media, who is known for publishing articles that regularly smear Islam and has been a key factor of the rise of the alt-right movement. Last week, Bannon lashed out at the media in a New York Times interview, calling them, quote, the opposition party, and saying that it should keep its mouth shut. Bannon plans to bring this strategy to the first NSC meeting, where he plans to give National Security Advisor Michael Flynn a wedgie to assert his dominance. And representatives of Iraq's government say that the country should issue a ban for American visitors in return for Donald Trump's Muslim ban. The country's Foreign Affairs Committee made the call on Sunday when they got together to discuss Trump's decision. Iraq's Popular Mobilization Forces, Iranian-backed paramilitary group trained to fight ISIS, also called for the ban, along with ejecting American nationals that are currently in the country. The group's leader, Ahmed al-Assadi, said the Iraqis are feeling, quote, a sense of betrayal and anger, especially among those who helped U.S. forces. If the ban were to go through, this would allow Iran to further cement control in the country without U.S. interference. It also shows how the Muslim ban has already sowed a deep resentment in the Middle East and likely will invite retaliatory attacks. Also, Americans may never get that Iraqi honeymoon they've always dreamed about, or enjoy the pleasures of Crude Land, the 30-foot oil-slicked water slide that leads into the Persian Gulf. Membership fees are rising at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago, the country's ritziest bordello of Botox flesh. On January 1st, fees at the country club doubled from $100,000 to $200,000. President Obama's former top ethics lawyer, Norm Eisen, said that this is, quote, not a very subtle exploitation of the fact that the club's figurehead is now President of the United States. Eisen said that this is the type of behavior he'd expect from Louis XIV and not a U.S. president. But let's be honest, we all kind of expected this, didn't we? A membership at Mar-a-Lago enables visitors to mingle with the president, particularly during special events such as the annual Winter White House. The $100,000 price has been in place since 2012, when it was cut from $200,000. It's unclear why the price rise suddenly happened, but we could guess at one reason in particular. In addition to the $200,000, members pay $14,000 per year to hobnob with the District 1 crowd. Mar-a-Lago is no longer run by Trump, as he resigned as head of the Trump Organization and gave control to his sons. But there are issues because he handed his business off to his sons, which creates a big, beautiful conflict of interest. Critics say that memberships can be used to curry favor with the president and can be used as a loophole from rules barring foreign governments from giving money to a U.S. president. So expect a whole lot more Saudi princes and oil executives to suddenly feel the hankering for some patio shuffleboard. This was Alex Kack for 5 on 20 News. Coming up next, Sean sees dead people.
Better to die fighting for freedom than be a prisoner all the days of your life. Bob Marley said that. You say you want a revolution, well, all right. It just so happens that I've got 4 revolutionaries who died today in history. She was meritorious and dutiful, his peaceful resistance, beautiful. Her social causes were vast, but his contributions, will they last? Let's go. On this day, in 1836, Betsy Ross, the American seamstress, who is widely credited with making the American flag, died of natural causes at the age of 84. Did Betsy Ross create the American flag, though? Betsy's creation of the flag is not an established historical fact like the signing of the Declaration of Independence or Washington's winter at Valley Forge. Those events quite definitely took place and were public knowledge from the beginning. There was an affidavit, however, by Betsy's daughter, Rachel Fletcher, in which she implied that Betsy had a significant hand in the design of the flag. Supposedly, the original flag was a square, which Betsy insisted was the wrong proportion. In addition to that, the stars, 13 at the time, were scattered all over the blue field in the upper left corner of the flag. Betsy insisted that they be arranged in some sort of geometry and suggested a circle, to be more specific. Also, the stars were supposedly 6-pointed stars in the beginning, hail Satan, which Betsy suggested should be 5-pointed stars. I guess she got her way in the end. Betsy Ross worked much of her life as a seamstress, which was probably why she got the job. Her skill set got her pretty close to the front lines of the Revolutionary War. She repaired uniforms and made tents and blankets for soldiers, and even helped assemble stuffed paper tube cartridges with musket balls for prepared package ammunition for the Continental Army. Betsy Ross died in her home amidst the bustle of Philadelphia. Her home is actually a tourist destination, but like the creation of the flag, nobody knows if it was actually her real home. Her body was first interred at the Free Quaker Burial Grounds on North 5th Street in Philadelphia. 20 years later, her remains were moved to the Mount Moriah Cemetery, also in Philadelphia. In preparation for the American bicentennial, the city ordered the remains be moved to the courtyard of the now legendary Betsy Ross House in 1975. However, cemetery workers found no remains beneath her tombstone. Bones found elsewhere in the family plot were deemed to be hers and were reinterred in the current grave visited by tourists at the supposed Betsy Ross house. On this day, in 1948, Mahatma Gandhi, India's political and spiritual leader, was assassinated in New Delhi by Hindu extremists at the age of 78. Gandhi was the preeminent leader of the Indian independence movement in British-ruled India, employing non-violent civil disobedience. Gandhi led India to independence and inspired movements for civil rights and freedom across the world. Gandhi famously led Indians in challenging the British-imposed salt tax with the 250-mile Dandi Salt March in 1930, and later in calling for the British to quit India in 1942. He was imprisoned for many years upon many occasions in both South Africa and India. Gandhi attempted to practice nonviolence and truth in all situations and advocated that others do the same. He lived modestly in a self-sufficient residential community and wore the traditional Indian dhoti and shawl, woven with yarn hand-spun on a charkha. He ate simple vegetarian food and also undertook long fasts as a means of both self-purification and social protest. So on this day in 1948, at 5:17 p.m., Gandhi was with his grandnieces in a public garden when Nathuram Godse fired 3 bullets from a Beretta 9mm pistol into his chest at point-blank range. Godse was a Hindu nationalist with links to the extremist Hindu Mahasabha, who held Gandhi guilty of favoring Pakistan and strongly opposed the doctrine of nonviolence. By Hindu tradition, Gandhi's ashes were to be spread on a river, but instead they were poured into urns which were seen across India for memorial services. And, believe it or not, on this day in 2006, Coretta Scott King, American activist and wife of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., died of ovarian cancer. She was also 78, like Gandhi, at the time of her death. Coretta Scott King was a longtime advocate for world peace, and author Michael Eric Dyson has called her an earlier and more devoted pacifist than her husband, although Mrs. King would object to the term pacifism. Instead, she believed herself to be an advocate of nonviolent, direct action to achieve social change. In 1957, Mrs. King was one of the founders of the Committee for Sane Nuclear Policy, now called Peace Action, and she spoke in San Francisco on the same day that her husband spoke in New York during the major anti-Vietnam War March of April 15th in 1967. She also championed LGBTQ rights in a number of ways. Coretta Scott King was an early supporter in the struggle for lesbian and gay civil rights. In August of 1983 in Washington, D.C., she urged the amendment of the Civil Rights Act to include gays and lesbians as a protected class. She may have received criticism for her role in LGBTQ justice causes, as suggested by one quote. "I still hear people say that I should not be talking about the rights of lesbian and gay people, but I hasten to remind them that Martin Luther King Jr. said, 'Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.' I appeal to everyone who believes in Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream to make room at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood for lesbian and gay people." On January 14th, 2006, Coretta made her last public appearance in Atlanta at a dinner honoring her husband's memory. On January 26th of 2006, King checked into a rehabilitation center in Rosarito Beach, Mexico, under a different name. Doctors did not learn her real identity until her medical records arrived the next day and did not begin treatment due to her condition. Coretta Scott King died late in the evening on January 30th, 2006 at the Rehabilitation Center in Rosarito. The hospital was called the Oasis Hospital, and she was there undergoing holistic therapy for her stroke and advanced stage ovarian cancer. The main cause of her death is believed to be respiratory failure due to complications from ovarian cancer. Her remains were transported to Georgia, where she had a grand and celebratory funeral. In attendance were all living presidents and their wives, except for Barbara Bush for some reason. Senator and soon-to-be President Barack Obama was in attendance as well. And on this day in 2015, Karl Djerassi, the Austrian-born American chemist and father of the contraceptive pill, died at the age of 91 from complications of liver and bone cancer. Djerassi was a Jewish refugee who fled to America from World War II-torn Austria. One incredible story from his early days in America is that he and his mother were conned out of their last $20 by a swindling New York cab driver. Djerassi wrote Eleanor Roosevelt about his tragedy, and in return, she offered him a college scholarship. From a New York Times article upon his death, Dr. Djerassi wrote books, plays, and 1,200 scientific articles taught at universities for 5 decades, created an artist colony in California, and obtained a patent on the first antihistamine. His work on the science of birth control helped engender enormous controversies and social changes, altering sexual and reproductive practices, family economics, and the working lives of millions of women around the world. And on this day, in the year 2017, 5 on 20 segment, Sean Sees Dead People died to death from too much death. As I have not worried to be born, I do not worry to die, nor am I afraid to kill this segment. And from every death emerges new life. Join me next week as I unveil my new segment. Thanks.